You're listening to How to Drink Less, and I'm your host, Adriana Cloud. Whether your goal is to cut back, take a break, or say goodbye to alcohol for good, this podcast will help you stop drinking on autopilot, learn how to manage cravings, and feel fully in control around alcohol. It's easier than you think. Listen on to find out how. Hey everyone, hope you're all doing well. I am going to dive right in today, and we are talking about how to actually say no to a drink. Now, what I used to do when I was trying to quit drinking was I would just show up to the pub with my friends and hope for the best. I wouldn't actually think through what it would be like to be in a place where everyone around me was drinking, and really a place where drinking was kind of the point of being there, right? I just relied on willpower, keeping my fingers crossed that somehow in the moment I would be strong enough to resist the temptation and I would order a lemonade or a ginger beer. And that's what I hear from my clients too before they start working with me. They want to cut back on their drinking, but when it comes to actually doing that, they don't really think through the practicalities of saying no to a drink, like at all. They just decide that they want to drink less, and they hope that somehow the decision itself will be enough and the universe will get the message and magically make the evening unfold in the best way possible. Even if they have some kind of goal, for example, to not drink anything Monday through Wednesday, or to go out and have just one drink, they don't actually have any plan for how they're going to achieve that goal. It's mostly just wishful thinking. And yes, sometimes that works. There will be those times when the vibes are just right and you're able to say no and stick to your plan. But other times you will walk up to the bar fully intending on ordering a soda, and then you will watch your friends all order cocktails, and when it's your turn, you will hear yourself asking for a Pinot Noir instead of a soda. Relying only on vibes and crossing your fingers is not going to get you the change you're looking for. If you actually want to drink less, you have to think about what that choice entails in reality and prepare for it. Because when you prepare ahead of time, you have a much higher chance of success. Funny how that works, right? And if you want to drink less and get better at relaxing without alcohol or enjoying a night out with your friends without drinking, you have to actually choose to sometimes say no to a drink on purpose. You have to practice the thing that you want to get better at. And in the long term, anytime you say no to a drink, or plan to say no to a drink, even if you end up drinking in the end, it's an opportunity to get to know your habit better, which means you have more power over it. Because it's hard to change what you don't understand. You might get lucky every now and then, but if you want reliable change in the long term, it is much easier to do that if you have a better understanding of why you drink in the first place. So let's talk about how to say no. First of all, think about why you want to say no. What's on the other side of that decision? So often, when we think about cutting back on drinking, we're focused on what we're giving up. There's a deep sense of deprivation, like we'll be missing out on something that other people will get to enjoy without us. I want you to flip that question and ask yourself, what do you stand to gain by saying no? Because, and this is going to sound really cheesy, so please forgive me, but every time you say no to one thing, you're saying yes to something else, and vice versa. When you say no to a drink, what are you saying yes to? Maybe it's integrity because you get to keep your promises. Maybe it's a better night's sleep. Maybe you're being more present with your kids when you get home tonight after happy hour with your coworkers. Maybe it's having better focus tomorrow. Maybe it's more money in your wallet because 3 margaritas and an Uber home are a lot more expensive than two iced teas and driving yourself back. Another question you can ask yourself is, who are you practicing becoming when you say no? For so many of us, even people who don't drink every day, drinking has become a part of our identity, and breaking this habit requires us to reimagine our entire identity and to see ourselves as someone different. When you say no to a drink, even though everyone else around you is ordering alcohol, you're practicing honoring yourself rather than just following the group along. Maybe you're practicing unwinding without alcohol. Maybe you're practicing enjoying your food without numbing your palate with alcohol. Maybe you want to get better at feeling connected with your romantic partner without the need to get buzzed first. Whatever it is, connect to your reason for why you want to be able to say no to the drink. And then think about what you want to say to other people if someone offers you an alcoholic drink or asks you why you're not drinking. As I'm always saying, you don't owe anyone an explanation for what's in your glass. It is entirely up to you how much you want to say to other people about trying to cut back. And once again, I give you permission to lie if you don't want to tell other people the truth. They're not entitled to your story unless you choose to share it with them. But the reality is that people are nosy, and especially if you're with people who you normally drink with, odds are that if you suddenly opt for sparkling water when you're usually the one who encourages everyone to get a pitcher of sangria, there will be questions. And trust me, you want to have an answer prepared ahead of time. Even if that answer is simply no thank you, and you offer no other explanation, which again, you're entitled to do. It's a good idea to have an answer ready for people who might push you to drink. Even though the conversation around alcohol in the larger society is changing, and it's now a lot more common for people to take breaks from drinking, and we have campaigns like Dry January, Dry July, Sober October, which are becoming more popular. But there is still the underlying assumption in many cultures and many circles that drinking is just the default behavior. And when you go against the default, some people might take it upon themselves to convince you why you should drink. You know what I'm talking about. Those comments like, come on, don't be a killjoy, don't let me drink alone, one drink won't hurt, and so on. How do you want to handle those? How do you want to respond if a friend tries to guilt trip you by saying that if you don't drink, then she can't order a glass of wine either, and now it's somehow your fault because you've ruined her night because she was really looking forward to that glass of wine? It helps to remind yourself that when you tell people you're not drinking, their response says more about them than it does about you. Some people get defensive because they think that you're judging their drinking. Some people have a problematic relationship with alcohol themselves, and that's why they only feel okay drinking if other people are also drinking. It's really not about you, it's about them. Now, I have two very practical suggestions for how to answer when someone asks, would you like a drink? The first is, instead of saying, no thank you, say, yes, I would love a soda or a lemonade or a tea or whatever your non-alcoholic drink of choice is. But the point is to answer with a yes. Yes, I'd love an iced tea. Because it feels much better to say yes to something. You're owning your choice and naming what you want, which feels very different from saying, no, I'm not drinking. When we say no, there's this hint of deprivation, whether it's conscious or unconscious. Like, we wish we could say yes, but sadly, we're having to deny ourselves. And also, when someone asks if you'd like a drink and you say, yes, I'd like a lemonade, it's much harder for them to argue with that and to try to convince you that you should, in fact, have a glass of wine. Because you have just named what you want. And people usually are more likely to respect that if they think that that is actually what you want. The second practical tip I've got for you is actually one that a client of mine taught me. If you're listening, you know who you are. Thank you for sharing that with me. I have now taught it to so many other people. And that is when you're asked what you'd like to drink, say, I'll start with a lemonade, or I'll start with a Coke, or again, whatever your non alcoholic drink of choice is. It takes off the pressure of the choice because you're simply starting with that alcohol free option. And for some people, that feels way less restrictive than committing right away to not drinking any alcohol all evening. So if you feel like you'd benefit from leaving the door open and just exploring how you feel, try this trick. Say, I'll start with dot 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 and just see how it goes. Because if you were drinking to relieve anxiety, for example, and you end up starting with a non-alcoholic drink, by the time you finish with that first drink, you might be way less anxious, and now you realize that you don't actually need the alcohol to relax, and then you can continue having other non alcoholic beverages. And of course, if you do better when the option of alcohol is completely off the table, then this suggestion is not for you. Trust yourself to know if this will work for you or not, but if you think that you might benefit from saying, I'll start with, then use it and see how it goes. I also have a special resource that I want to share with you all. I made this guide a while back called 100 Ways to Answer the Question, Why Are You Not Drinking? And it's really 100 answers. Some are serious, some are humorous, some are slightly more polite versions of, it's none of your business. And I will put the link in the show notes if you want to download it and to borrow some of those answers or use them as inspiration for your own answers. It's absolutely free and I want you to have it. Okay, the next thing to consider is what will you actually drink? If possible, decide this ahead of time. If it's an option, say you're going to your neighbor's barbecue, bring your own non alcoholic drinks. And bring extra because I guarantee you that someone else will be grateful to have the option to not consume alcohol. If you're going to a restaurant or a bar, check out their menu online and see if they have any mocktails or non alcoholic beers and such. You might even call the place and inquire what alcohol free options they have. It helps to know what you're walking into because oftentimes the only reason we end up ordering an alcoholic drink is because it's a familiar choice and a safe choice. I had a client who shared that if she went to a new restaurant or bar, she would sometimes get overwhelmed by the menu and she would feel put on the spot when the server asked what she'd like to drink. So she would just end up ordering a glass of Sauvignon Blanc just to get out of that situation because that was a safe choice and usually they would have that. She didn't want to make the server wait while she looked at what other options were available to her, so she just defaulted to what was familiar. And that's why it's good to check ahead of time what you might be able to order. The next thing I'll suggest you do ahead of time is to normalize that you might be a bit uncomfortable. If you're going into a situation where you normally drink and you're choosing not to drink, it's going to feel a little weird. And weird could cover any number of things from mildly on edge to super self conscious to cranky and frustrated and everything in between. And that's totally normal. Of course, it feels weird because it's different. And our brains get very alarmed at the first sign of change. Just remind yourself that this is to be expected and nothing has gone wrong. And odds are that even when you're drinking, sometimes there are awkward and unpleasant moments and situations. Alcohol doesn't magically create a colorful paradise where we're all smiling and happy all the time. It's just that when we're drinking, we're numbing our senses and our perception, so we're less likely to notice the awkward and uncomfortable moments. You don't have that luxury when you're fully present and alert to your environment, But that's the whole point, to be present. As I talked about on the last podcast episode, when you numb the bad feelings, you also end up numbing the good feelings. And the opposite is true as well. When you're not drinking and you're fully present, you might experience a bit more discomfort than you're used to, but you're also capable of experiencing more joy and pleasure and connection and peace and relaxation, exactly because you're not numbing your senses. That said, there's a difference between anticipating some potential awkwardness and catastrophizing. So be careful not to spin completely in the other direction and convince yourself that you're doomed to an evening of suffering and immeasurable pain just because you've decided to lay off the rosé. It probably won't be quite so bad as your brain is trying to convince you that it will be. Your lower brain has its own agenda. It wants the reward that it's used to getting. It wants the alcohol. And so it's working extra hard to sell you on the story that it'll be so hard to say no, and you will have such intense FOMO, and the whole night will be ruined. Our primitive brains are real drama queens. But time and again, what I have experienced and what I hear from my clients is that the reality is often much better than what they were anticipating. Yes, even when there's some initial awkwardness, that dissipates really fast, and they can have a perfectly pleasant evening without drinking. So just be mindful of your brain's tendency to exaggerate just how bad it will be if you choose not to do the wine pairing with your dinner. The best attitude you can adopt going into any situation is to stay curious. Commit to just noticing what comes up. The good, the bad, the unpleasant, the ridiculous, the boring. Commit to being an uninterested observer of your own experience because, regardless of what happens, you're gathering useful information. Now, depending on the situation you're heading into and how comfortable you feel about honoring your commitment to say no to alcohol, you might also want to come up with a contingency plan for what you're going to do if you're struggling. How will you take care of yourself? This might look like texting a friend or reaching out to your sobriety coach if you're one of my clients. They can offer words of encouragement and remind you that you're stronger than a craving. It might look like ahead of time asking a friend to text you to check in on you. Or, depending on where you're going and who's with you, if there is someone who knows that you're trying to drink less, maybe you ask them to sit next to you or to stand by your side so that you know you're not alone. Maybe you make a plan to leave early. In the long term, of course, you want to get to a point where you don't care if other people around you are drinking, and it's not a problem to be in those situations. But in the short term, while you're building those muscles, it's okay to choose to remove yourself if you're finding it too challenging to be in that environment. Early on in sobriety, I heard this saying that 1 hour of socializing sober equals 3 hours of socializing while drinking. And in my experience, that's absolutely true. The point is, you get to decide how long you want to stay and what you're comfortable with. Stay present with your own needs. Check in with your body. There is no need to push yourself to stay longer just to prove that you can, if deep down you know that you will feel better if you remove yourself from the situation. Take care of yourself in whatever way feels good in the moment. And finally, after the fact, evaluate what happened. Were you able to say no? Were you able to stick to your plan? If yes, what helped you to do that? And if no, what stood in the way? I know it's easier said than done, but if you were not able to say no and you ended up drinking more than you'd planned to, please try not to judge yourself. Lean on self-compassion and curiosity here. What came up that made you choose to drink? Were you maybe trying to fit in? Or were you chasing a positive feeling or trying to escape a negative experience? Were you bored? Were you anxious? Were you thirsty? Or maybe you were just drinking on autopilot because that's what you've previously done in that situation. Regardless of the outcome, the better you can understand what happened, the more information you have for next time, so you can prepare better for future situations like this. And even if you ended up drinking, even though that wasn't your goal, that's okay. Celebrate that you tried something different and you stayed curious. You still got to practice the skill you want to get better at, saying no. And that is a win in itself. And I do want to emphasize that saying no is a skill that you will get better at the more you practice. Because some people believe you should just be able to do it with 100% success rate from the moment you decide that you want to stop drinking or to cut back. Somehow it should be like a switch, and from now on you're just a non-drinker. But that is rarely the case in my experience. Most people have to practice this, and it gets easier over time. So just be mindful if you have some unrealistic perfectionist standard for yourself that this should just be easy for you already. Why would it be easy when you've spent years, if not decades, practicing saying yes to alcohol? It's a ridiculous fantasy. Unsubscribe from it and cut yourself some slack. You're learning a new skill, and it might take some time, and it certainly won't be perfect every single time. But keep at it. Next time you want to say no, come back to this episode, listen to it again, and prepare ahead of time, and that will help you. And if you give these strategies a try, please write in and tell me how it went and what you noticed. I would love to hear from you. And as always, if you're trying to make changes in your drinking habits, but you're feeling stuck and you're looking for extra support, I would love to help. I've been where you are, and I would love to help you learn how to respond differently to your triggers and to feel free. So book a consultation by the link in the show notes, and let's just chat and see if we're a good fit to work together. All right, my friends, this is where I leave you for this week. Take good care, and I'll talk to you soon. If you're looking for practical advice for how to say no to alcohol and say yes to yourself, you will want to get on my email list. Sign up to receive my free guide with 7 steps to kickstart your sobriety. The link is in the show notes, so go and grab it now, and I'll see you soon in your inbox.